So hi, my name's Andrew Neville. I'm an art graduate from IDT, and I'd like to thank the people of Ormond for inviting me here to speak a bit about my practice. So I think in terms of like an overarching concern in my work, I'm interested in the idea of locality, and in particular, how digital technologies affect how this is experienced. So I think it's appropriate to begin with this painting here, titled Demarcation, and it's basically a painting of my local area. And I was initially drawn to painting this because it changed so much in recent years that I found it kind of difficult to establish really kind of any meaningful sense of place here. So in terms of my approach, I started exploring this space then through Google Earth, and I found this interesting for a number of reasons. Kind of exploring it from these kind of vantage points, I was able to see the rooftops, and I never actually just looked at any of the rooftops on these buildings, and I found that fascinating for some reason. But also the fact that the imagery, like this kind of satellite imagery, was outdated, and so like using that as a reference, I like some of the buildings that I've painted there are already gone. So the fact that like I think that in a way kind of represents how kind of nothing says there maybe of like worth for a significant amount of time. Everything's kind of constantly in flux there. So yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I was kind of drawn to paint this, and why I felt so kind of strange about my relationship with this place. So yeah, in terms of kind of my technique then, I use a limited set of I use a limited colour palette, and this kind of is using in a good few of my works, and with these kind of pale pinks and purples and these kind of teal colours, I wanted to kind of represent this idea of it being analytical, or kind of me looking like at this place as being kind of maybe cold or unfeeling, or in a sense through a lens or a program. Yeah, so I came across this online, and it's a 3D laser scan of the Cloneycavin bog body, and I was fascinated by this idea that this kind of physical, like human body, has sort of kind of transcended into some kind of virtual existence, and it also made me think about kind of the manner in which I was kind of viewing this then, like through my laptop. Like just as this was kind of originally taken like from a bog into a museum context, it really got me thinking about the manner in which I was kind of viewing this sitting on my laptop at home, and kind of what meaning then I could derive from this sort of experience. So then that made me kind of look at artifacts closer to my own experience that are kind of fragmented into online context. And here was depicting the scene. Oh yeah, this image is titled Bird Assemblage, and it was depicting the activity of collecting. And you can see this kind of like mound of pallets and tires, and it's almost entirely divorced, with the exception of that kind of wireframe building there, from any sense of like location or grounding in a sense. And up the top there, I was thinking of the idea of like the symbol or the icon of a light or lamp. I wanted this to look like really artificial, and look like everything has kind of been taken from a context and placed to be viewed in this very kind of unsettling manner. So in terms of my process then, I like to source representations of my locality online. I find this interesting because it kind of sets me at a distance into the thing that I want to represent. And with this image, I think I took a video still I see on Facebook, and it was a bunch of lads showing off their homemade pool, and I could definitely connect with this in ways. Due to my own experiences growing up. But I think in the manner then I was viewing this through like a video, and there was kind of a contrived nature to it as well. There was equally a distance there, and I feel like that's an interesting site to begin working with, a painting with. And then I also like to incorporate the use of 3D programs when I'm into my development process. And this was an experiment I conducted where I took like the basic elements from that the still of the video, like the tarp from that they put in the pool, and all these basic structures, and it allowed me to take like seeing this from only one perspective, to kind of recreate it and look at it from a bird's eye view. And I was really interested in this idea then of trying to paint something from another perspective and seeing kind of what I missed out because I'm only seeing it from one singular point. Yeah, and so I don't really have a strict way in terms of developing my work. I kind of let like it flow as organically as possible. I could go exclusively from just like making sketches, or I could work in a 3D program, but I think I find it most interesting when I'm able to sort of marry the two together and kind of create a dialogue where I could start off with a sketch of an idea, and then I could try kind of recreate that in a 3D program, and I could mess around with like material properties and lighting and just kind of navigate that space, and that could then inform how I make a drawing then, which will ultimately lead into a painting. And I think the use of these sort of 3D programs then affect the aesthetic choices that I make in my work. And this here is a diagram of a technique used in kind of game design and computer graphics called billboard imaging. And what essentially it does is, if a fully realized model, in this case, like as you can see, a tree is at a distance to the camera, it will be replaced by a flat image of itself, or two flat images intersecting each other. And what this does is it has been developed from the way we kind of see things at a distance, and our eye will kind of make up that it is actually a fully realized tree rather than being a flat picture. And as you can see, I kind of appropriated this idea in terms of these bushes, if you can see them in this painting titled Refiguration. And they're just two flat images of bushes intersecting each other, kind of meant to signify a physical whole. But I was very deliberate about my placement of these bushes in the image, because as I was saying, these will always be off into the distance in terms to trick your eye. I kind of wanted to set up a confrontation between the viewer and this illusion, like this illusion that's kind of always existed on the periphery, on the periphery of our vision. And you can see I kind of like have skeletal wireframes there and other things going on the image that I was influenced by kind of computer graphics by. And I think these are a very contemporary way of kind of expressing the surreal, and also an appropriate way of articulating sort of the further integration of the digital into our lived experience. So yeah, I think I do like developing my work up to a certain point where I'm kind of happy to jump into a painting, but I always like to leave a gap there, and a gap there for intuition, kind of instinct in a sense. What I mean by that is, no matter kind of how, what was I saying? I think when working with reference and kind of building up an idea of an image I want to make, I think sort of the less it's planned, or the less you kind of go by that reference in the image, and in terms of like applying paint, I think the more you'll allow yourself into the image. So with this painting of my granddad here, I remember just being struck by the image, and I didn't really know how I was going to go about it, but you can see I didn't really care or stick to representing them proportionally in any way correctly, or in terms of my colour choice. That happened very kind of instinctually on the palette when I was just kind of going ahead with it. And I feel like this allowed for me to maybe convey a sense of my sensational experience of him, if that makes sense, like kind of how I see him, or his presence, or his being in a sense, rather than just kind of how he appears in the world. And so finally I'd like to just bring you through a few of the images, a few images of my development of one of my grad show pieces titled Vicinity. I remember thinking, I remember I came across this image on Facebook, and it was by a bunch of lads where I live, and they were posing with their bonfire materials. And I remember I felt kind of strange about this, seeing this image, and I remember I just kind of needed to sketch it. And then kind of after sketching that, I kind of found out why I was feeling a bit weird with this, and it was because I was able to connect with like the activity of collecting that I was seeing here, and yeah, kind of through my own experiences. But I was kind of taken back by the sense of by the idea that everyone was kind of posing in front of a camera and kind of taking part in this documentation to be shared online, and this is a characteristic of the activity that is foreign to my own experience of it, because I feel like it's kind of relatively new thing. So I had that feeling in mind, and so when I went to kind of further develop it and sketch, I was thinking about how that idea was very alienating. And so on the left here, you can see I kind of substituted the grass for this disorienting maze-like pattern, and then in what appears to be sky there's just kind of layers of these gradients just overlapping each other, and I made the figures entirely ambiguous, just almost like two tones. And on the right is just kind of me kind of working out in ways in which I can go about painting the background. But then when it gets to the painting process then and decision making, I think how I was trying to see making this work was sort of like a spectrum. On one end you have me wanting to represent this image in a familiar way and it being kind of placeable, but then also on the other hand this kind of alienating sense and it being unidentifiable. And I think the perfect point I wanted to reach was right in the middle of that, where kind of both are being simultaneously expressed. So you can see that in the picture on the right, I was starting to kind of make the figures a little bit more sharper, their poses are more realised, and you can see their clothing. But I think through the painting of the image, it was just a continuous back and forth until I found the kind of that mid spot. And I think I got it here where, this is where I was happy with leaving it, where it has a kind of sense of it being grounded locationally. It has an urban sense to it, and yeah, it's not entirely surreal. It does have, it looks like it could be on the outskirts of the city somewhere, and the figures do look like in a way that they're kind of posing and realised, but I think I've retained that alien quality to the work, and something sort of unnerving about the way the image is rendered. So I think that's hitting that midpoint is something that I like in my work, and it's kind of a thought that I keep on continually making works now. So that's the end. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions now?
Do you think through like the fact that everyone's kind of having this experience of like living in a place and also seeing kind of representations everywhere, that we're all going to end up with a bit of a warped sense of like place and kind of connection?
Yeah.
Question before I got to, sorry.
Yeah, it's something that I'm trying to kind of ruminate on upon in my work. I've definitely felt a sense of like a disassociation with kind of seeing how things like that have been represented. Kind of things of my own experience and how I'm kind of seeing them in this manner. I think something that I've really clocked in on in my work is this performativity, and maybe a lot of what's going in, what's happening in the work is that there wasn't really that much percent of a sense of performativity in my childhood with things, and I was looking at things getting really kind of contrived now, and I don't know. It's just something that I'm seeing, and I'm having less of an ability to connect with. But maybe that's just getting old as well, you know. Yeah.
Any other questions, or
for either of the artists?
yeah, for anyone if it's well you to get a
Maybe you
chance.
thought something since then.
What's the crack?
The changing, like, in representation and how reality is becoming a lot of representation and digital representation, do you see that as like an evolution, like an occurrence, or do you have like a specific opinion on it? Do you see it as a positive thing or a negative thing, that our reality is becoming more so representations of it?
I don't really think it's good or bad yet. I really haven't made up my decision on that. I think making my works, I'm sort of just observing how I'm seeing the world and trying to say, oh, this is a bit mad. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think I'm trying to express some of the qualities that I feel are debilitating in the work, but also I think there's some kind of strangeness as well, and there's some maybe I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit more. Maybe I'm a little bit more negative than I thought. But yeah, I do think. Yeah, I think maybe I am focusing a bit on how kind of dislocating it is. You know, I think there's just kind of. I think as the digital is kind of integrating more into our lived experience, there's just kind of new meanings created. I think from this that I don't really kind of understand yet, but I think through having a practice, I'm able to kind of explore this a little bit more and kind of make judgments upon it through the work. You know. I don't know if that made sense to you, but
Satisfactory.
So my name's Jamie. I'm just going to kind of give you a brief talk about the methods I use, the starting points of where I get my ideas from, and then talk about a few finished pieces more in detail. So these pictures are kind of starting points for lots of my ideas. The top left is of this air vent in my apartment block, and I was just really interested in this space, and I wanted to get into it, but I couldn't because there was a thing in front of it. But I'm really interested in how like these different spaces are produced. Like if you have a regular space, it's kind of thought that it's produced through experience or through living in it or stuff like that. And then I was more curious of the question of what about spaces that people can't get into? How are they produced, and where do they come in that kind of realm of the production of space? So then the top right one is just another. It's a tiny crack in this old wooden wall. I think it's just through like stress or heat, but there's just this tiny bit of light that just like represents this space and like what could be happening on the other side. And then the larger image is, if you put your eye up against close to it, you can actually see into another room, just through this tiny crack. So it kind of these inaccessible spaces I'm really interested in exploring. And then to explore these spaces, I'm really interested in technology and different kind of gadgets and different ways of exploring this weird kind of inaccessible space. So the large image on the left is a endoscope camera. It's just a tiny camera with a fixed focal length, and it's connected to like a 2 meter long wire which you can bend and push under floorboards or through walls or kind of any little space and just record it or take pictures of it. Then the bottom right is a printer scanner, just a household printer, and I took the scanner laser from it, and I was able to copy images with the scanner camera and some movement as well. And then the image in the middle is just because I talk a bit about using a 360-degree camera, so it's kind of just to give an idea more of how that works. So it's 2 lenses either side of a camera, and then it simultaneously takes a picture, and then the camera has processing stuff to stitch the image together, and you get this 360-degree image or video. And finally, I just have my like smartphone there because it's my main research tool. I use it for like taking pictures, recording sound. I tracked people on GPS before, and just like watching random YouTube how-to videos. It's just like my number one tool. And also I really like using like a smartphone for showing my work. I just think it's really interesting that we have this like tiny, like real powerful computer that we can just like carry around and then show a piece of artwork anywhere. So I'll move on to, this is like the first finished piece I'm going to talk about. It's called Wood, and all my works have real like simple names, just because I don't want the name to take away from what the work is. It's just a piece of wood, really, and I just like that, staying true to what it is. So this was originally, I was interested, there was this wooden wall and I just wanted to drill through it in my house and see what's on the other side, and it wasn't. So I was doing this a few times just because I was curious like about what was on the inside, and I was sticking the 360-degree camera in the hole to take pictures of through it. But then when I started looking back at these pictures, I realized it was much more interesting, the actual texture of the wood, rather than what was on the other side. It was actually the like space created through the wood. So I started taking the pictures just so that it was kind of concentrating on the texture and shining a light back through the wood. And then I used an app called Theta Plus, which is the top right. It's just a screenshot of it. So this app allows you to turn a still photo into a video. So each of the blue points are just pinpoints where you can map around the image, and then you can encode it into a video, and then the pinpoints will be wherever the viewer looks. So I created a video of going really, really slowly in through the hole and then back out, and I stopped it down as slow as I possibly could, just so it kind of, I almost wanted to not even realize it was moving. I just kind of liked that effect. So then this work and the last work was originally one big structure. It was just a stud wall that I made, and I put it up against another old wall and created a space in between the old existing wall and the new wall I had created. And then I got the endoscope camera and put it up through the I put the endoscope camera up through the space. I did this just because, again, I was like really interested in kind of the in-between space of these two structures I created, and like the in-between like cavity wall. And it was really like, as I was looking at these spaces, I was kind of thinking like the only thing that goes in here are like little insects or spiders or stuff like that. And I was originally thinking I was sticking like a GoPro on a spider, but you can't find one big enough for that. So I just got this endoscope and kept pushing it up through it. And I really liked the differences between this video, how it's kind of erratic compared to the previous video where it's just really, really slow and controlled, but this one there's no real control, it's just kind of very erratic. So next for this one, this laptop, it was just an old laptop I had and it wasn't working, so I was really curious about how what the inside looked like, so I started to take it apart and thought the inner, like the motherboard and the inner components really looked like a cityscape. So I started to line them up with the horizon of the window, which are the photos on the right, and started again. I used the endoscope camera because I just thought it looked like it was like, again, like something just traveling through the cityscape, traveling through these different little spaces. Then I actually found out that the laptop, it was just a battery needed replaced, so I put that in, and then put all these videos back on the laptop. I made them into these little pop-up videos, like the adverts that constantly come up, so it was just like showing an exploration of the inside space of the laptop. I also, just in the top image, it's kind of hard to make out, but the thing hanging down it's the webcam of the laptop, so one of the pop-up videos was a live feed from that webcam, so the laptop in turn, like it was showing the space around it and showing the space inside it. I just kind of like that combination. Excuse me. Then for this work, it was just an observation I kind of made. I had this like polystyrene, it was in the windowsill and the light was shining through it, and I was really interested in how there was like this little space in between like the particles of the polystyrene, and how I was looking into how it was formed, and it's just like a chemical reaction. It fuses together, but it was like, it really reminded me of those old images on of bacteria on a microscope lens, and I just kind of thought about all this bacteria is everywhere and it's alive and moving, and like maybe there's this like weird live space in between the particles of the polystyrene. And again, I wanted to, for like the finished piece, I wanted it to be a physical like structure. So I happened to have the original polystyrene of the TV that it came in the packaging. So it's showing like an exploration of itself again. And this is just the last slide. So this was created just like purely out of curiosity. This light was in my kitchen and it was like flickering like this constantly, and I was wondering why it was doing that, so I started taking videos and photos of it, and I'm not sure if you can see, but there's a green flash every so often. So I started googling like why was this happening and what was going on. So it's inside the light bulb, there's all these atoms, and when the electricity hits the atoms, it excites them, like, and starts making them go really excited. And there's this immediate green flash, and then they calm down, and it's just the pure white light that you get. So I just wanted to capture this moment where the electricity hits the atoms. So I got a neon, an exact replica of the light made in green neon, and I just displayed it with the wires kind of going across a straight line, just to give the idea of that electricity passing through the wires and then straight into the light. And that's everything. So thank you.
But yeah, I guess I'll just take you through my degree showpiece first to kind of get you started on where I began as well. But yeah, so I had made a sculptural installation consisting of 4 sculptures, epoxy resin sculptures and a projection. And it was titled Getting to Know Your Body. It's an exploration of the feeling of being removed from oneself, of the interrupting body taking over. So your physical experience affecting your inner experience. And I guess I wanted to explore this kind of gap or distance through exploring the coupling of photography and mould making. There is a Canadian artist called Liz Magor, and she said a really interesting thing once about the relationship between film photography and mould making, in that they both have the real, the actual, and it goes from a negative to a positive to a copy of the real. So I thought by combining these two, you could it might exaggerate that gap or distance between something real and something recreated, and maybe highlight that kind of gap or distance between the body and the self. So yeah, I guess another thing about the works that I make is that people don't really know is that these aren't actually solid things. They're like soft, rubbery things. So I'm going to pass around a little sample for everyone to have a little feel of just while you're listening. Yeah, so I'll just go through a few more of the sculptures from that piece. So this again was a photograph and a mould combined. And I used a plastic vacuum former machine to make this. So I explored a few different methods of mould making in my practice as well. So I guess when I'm making things, I kind of aim to reduce rather than capture. So this was another piece titled Take Care, and it was a epoxy resin towel, and that was paired with a projection of light coming through a window that kind of creeped over it. This is the last one from that series. It's called A Strange Impulse, and it's an image of a snail on skin, so a macro shot. So this one kind of was one of the first ones that I made combining photography and mold making, and it came from we did a show in Palace as sort of a warm-up to our degree show, and when we were setting up I had one of the photographs I wanted to place from a series called Snail Gaze on the floor, and we were all standing around it and we were like, oh, that actually looks like it's supposed to be there rather than on the wall. And then I kind of realised that you can make photographs more sculptural than just flat things on a wall. And yeah, I guess I just kind of took that idea and went for it, and that's how I got my degree show out of it. Yeah, so I have some images from Checking In as well, which was a solo show here. So for Checking In, I guess I wanted to see it as sort of an extension to my degree show piece. And so similar kind of ideas, but I guess I wanted to exaggerate the feeling of self-consciousness, or like a hyper-awareness of the body. So it's sort of about exploring bodily and mental tension and the trials and tribulations that come within self-care. So there's a lot of objects that are used for self-care in it as well. And some of my older pieces from degree show I added to the show as well. So this is a poem by an American writer called Lydia Davis, and I use her for a lot of my research. It's a really odd little poem, but she writes a lot about self-consciousness, and she writes about the body as if it's an object that's way over there and she's way over here. Sometimes she'll write about her stomach is digesting food while she's having her book in her hand and reading, and it's just not her that's doing it, it's something else. So it's like vaguely familiar and intimate, the way she writes about body. But this poem in particular actually went really mad on Reddit, and people actually started to use it as a tool for mindfulness. So they use it as a practice instruction to make themselves aware of their thoughts and to slow down. And yeah, I guess I take a lot of inspiration from her work, so I thought it would be nice for you to read one of her poems. So one of my new pieces for this show was called At Odds. So it's two odd socks. One of them has the tone and one of them has the texture. And I had that placed over in this really unusual little part of this room to your right. Yeah. Another one was called A Quick Dip, and it was a photograph of a pond, but it was a really clear day when I was photographing, and I got the reflection of the trees above me and the sky in it as well. Yeah, I guess with this one I kind of wanted to make a sculpture that felt like it was battling itself a little bit, so I thought the Ring Boy was a good option to pair it with. And then just a different sort of iteration of this previous work. And I got quite lucky with this one because it fit in so well with the floorboards. Yeah. A lot of people confused about this one actually. But yeah, it's I guess this one is like a symbol of clumsiness or like kind of awkwardness. I like to try make my sculptures feel a bit silly and a bit a bit aware of themselves, or too aware of themselves. But yeah. So there's another new one. So one of the goals I had when I came into Ormond was to make a site-specific piece. I really wanted to make some kind of sculpture that commemorated the time that I spent here. And so I'd been thinking about making a mirror piece for a long time as well. And when I came in here and I was looking around the room, there's a gorgeous window there, and after the talks I would recommend you have a look outside. But there's so many interesting, really odd mix of buildings and different shapes and textures and colours out there. And a lot of the artists, especially the ones that work from this room, like Emma, they spent a lot of time looking out there and taking inspiration and drawing. So a lot of their work is taken directly from what they see out the window. So thought if it was a nice fit. So that's that one. And my last sculpture that I made for the show was called My Fly Meets Yours. And I paired this with my previous projection piece as well. So it was, I guess, an object of self-care and purity paired with an element of disgust and a bit of intimacy thrown in there as well. And yeah, that's about it. But I have a video as well of the show. And yeah, if you guys have any questions as well, I can take them.
How do you come up with the names for your work?
How do I come up with the names? Some of them come from poems that I've read. Some of them come from song titles. And others come from, like My Fly Meets Yours came from just a really weird event that happened and something somebody said to me one day. So I keep a notebook of like really odd sentences I hear, and sometimes they make it into my work.
Are they found objects like the mirror? Is that an object that you found, or is that something that you bought, or?
Some of them I buy specifically to make sculptures out of. Like the socks, I actually went shopping for socks for a sculpture and not to wear. And some of them are just objects that I have that I spent a lot of time looking at anyway. Yeah, I guess it's just a mix, really. Right, cheers. Thank you very much.